For all the attention, discussion, and scrutiny The Simpsons has received across its run, the consensus on its earliest years is shrouded in narrative instead of fact. It used to be about Bart, then it became about Homer. But for as long as that narrative has existed, there's been the counter-argument. I like Homer more and my reality is different from yours. I've already got this video off to a coarse start, but I do have a problem with the tunnel vision on display here. This is a show called The Simpsons. It's an ensemble piece starring a family of 5, not 2 people whom we can only focus on one at a time. I get that like all the information we share, pop culture trivia has to be streamlined so everyone can understand it, but what I want to see is the full truth of the matter. If the Bart Simpson show narrative is so strong that the Simpsons staff retroactively agree with it, then surely there's something to it. The Simpsons clearly started as a response to the family sitcom setup from the 50s and 60s, where the father is an all-knowing patriarch and the whole world revolves around him. This father was, more often than not, designed to be a role model for the audience to take a lesson away from. So Homer was created to be the exact opposite. When we learn a lesson from him, it's not because he's a great person right away, but because he has to learn that lesson first. As a reaction to how protagonists were depicted in TV in decades past, Homer arguably deserves credit for defining The Simpsons on that front, but that doesn't automatically make him the central figure of the show. Marge is also a response to old family sitcoms, deconstructing the housewife and making a character that had way more agency in family matters and her own life at large. But few have ever argued that Marge is the one central figure of The Simpsons. That could be a cool interpretation, just like all the others, but I'm getting off track. Why I bring up the satire of TV roles is that Bart isn't just a satire of the son who messes up from time to time, but still has respect for the rules and aspirations to be like his father. Bart's all like, what rules? And who, the Quidgy-Bo? It's through this disrespectful and rebellious personality that The Simpsons was able to stick out in the late 80s and early 90s. Bart was always seen as the main character of The Simpsons back then because he personified it. But if you look back to the earliest of the Tracy Ullman shorts, Maggie was the most frequent POV for this commentary on dysfunctional families at first. They were going for the irony that the youngest and most naive member of the family was the one who could truly see how weird the rest of them were.
Was that the bite of 87?
But along the way, they had more fun with Bart and Lisa being bratty kids and enraging Homer, but especially Bart. It should be noted that every other member of the family was based on Matt's real family, except for Bart, who was functionally his self-insert during the shorts, sharing the deadpan, sarcastic sense of humor that defined his comic strip life in hell.
Just think, sitting right here are 3 generations of Simpsons. What a nightmarish concept.
Bart!
By the end, he was the only member of the family to appear in every short, so it was only natural that he was the character who had the largest impact on general audiences' perception of what The Simpsons was before it was even a full series. This, however, is where Sam Simon comes in, bringing with him every cartoonist's mortal enemy. Most of them were sitcom writers. They were trained in the ways of the rigid sitcom setup, so they gave Homer as much focus as they could, going into his job and financial situations pretty quickly. Considering he's the breadwinner of the family, and they wanted to take aim at the big, loud, money-loving world of American media in the 1980s, it made sense for Homer to be front and center for those situations few other sitcom fathers were facing. I mean, what's gonna happen in 1990s? Some kind of economic recession or something? It's a cartoon, it can't predict the future. I believe that if there's any ancient series Bible of The Simpsons out there, that it prioritized Homer as the central figure of the show. However, plans change, and the show's crew will favor some characters over others, and it's clear right away in any Season 1 episode that Bart was the preferred character for conflict, comedy, and situations that were much more different than what other sitcoms were offering at the time. In plenty of episodes about Homer, it's Bart's antics that get the conflict started, and while Homer plays a supporting role to Bart in many cases, Bart supporting Homer is about as common. Boyhood and fatherhood were other themes Season 1 took its sweet time deconstructing. Predominantly male writers' rooms will result in that. I think this is where the camp of Bart and Homer shared equal billing comes from, because Lisa and Marge each only had one starring role in season 1, and Maggie hasn't got anything in the main show yet. Marge shared some marriage troubles with Homer, but the perspective was Homer's for one of them and split evenly for the other. Everyone was still being refined gradually, but I guess out of a drive to create radical jokes and stories and Matt still having a huge influence over the show, Bart is easily the most settled member of the family in season 1 compared to later. That, and there was no need to fix what wasn't clicking with audiences. The success of The Simpsons led to Bart mania. Everyone who knew The Simpsons in 1990 and 1991 had Bart in their minds first. The word of mouth, the rave reviews, the backlash from pearl clutches, the toys, the official shirts, the unofficial shirts, the music videos, the Butterfinger commercials, the video games, the big arcade game of which featured 4 family members as playable characters, but the home console games were overwhelmingly Bart-centric. In some ways, Fox making Bart into their mascot was the suits upstairs still being stuck in the 80s with how animation was marketed. Ninja Turtles does well with boys, DuckTales does well with boys, The Simpsons is a cartoon too, so we should focus on the boy. With that in mind, it makes the Bart mania push look more out of touch than it was. This is always what the entertainment industry is gonna do, take the aspect everyone likes and shove it in their faces all the time. Season 2 had the most direct responses to Bart mania, airing at its most feverish height, but it's for the best they didn't indulge in it and forget what they thought was so special about the show. Here's what I mean. Bart and Homer were each named in 2 episode titles in season 1, as was their family name. In season 2, Homer and Simpson were used twice again, and Bart was used 5 times, 4 of those uses being in the first half. This doesn't mean Bart was twice as prominent as Homer, but it did mean the show was aware who the masses were tuning in to see. Bart gets hit by a car doesn't even have much to do with him, but he still headlines it and gets the first 3 minutes to himself, including a very rare title card. There was cause and effect to how the staff presented its characters, despite not giving in that much to audience demand. The show prided itself on having virtually no network interference, so this wasn't Fox forcing more Bart out of them. He was front and center a lot of the time, but he didn't spout catchphrases as often and was thrust into more dramatic stories. Season 1 is sometimes criticized these days for being quite sappy and mopey, but that continued into Season 2, especially the Bart episodes. Yet I still think the writers had more to say about Homer. They started to make him dumber and quirkier so that he could make the same kinds of big mistakes that only Bart could previously. Lisa and Marge were also developed and given more focus, so I don't know if I could say this is them finding their groove with just Homer. It was a good season for every member of the family, but the Bart-Homer rivalry has gotten less lopsided, at least if you were paying attention to the show. Season 3 is usually the last to be lumped into this early Bart versus Homer debate, which makes sense considering how it started. Yeah, it's not in circulation anymore, but the season premiere is still significant. Stark Raving Dad as a singular episode was perhaps the most obvious influence of Bart Simpson's real-world popularity on the show and how it was made and promoted. The first big celebrity collaboration, mirroring real-world celebrity collaborations that were happening at the time. Bart Mania was still in the zeitgeist, but softening, reflected in the Monkey Paw segment of that year's Treehouse of Horror. They knew people would get tired of their characters if they were pushed in their faces all the time, especially the one who wished for this curse, winks followed by nudges.
$18 for this? What a ripoff!
Still, Bart was a prominent figure in not just the Simpson family, but the lives of a lot of the adults in Springfield. They weren't restricting him to childhood scenarios. They were pushing his luck by giving him flings with the Mafia, Krusty's personal life, Mrs. Krabappel's personal life, the police force, and a now recurring nemesis, Sideshow Bob. It's a stretch to say the show was getting more mature, but the juxtaposition of a 10-year-old boy with all these situations felt like them moving on from a 10-year-old's perspective of the world being the most attention-grabbing. Looking at the Homer episodes this season also demonstrates this. There's about the same amount as ever, but Homer's now settling into a more bombastic personality and being put in a bigger variety of situations. they're getting bigger laughs out of him now, so I can see why the Homer show perception usually kicks off here. I still think, like season 2, the focus is split fairly between him, Bart, Marge, and Lisa. After the success of Lisa's substitute, they honed in on what makes her a special member of the family. It no longer seemed like Bart was getting all the big childhood stories. Kicking off in the fall of 1992, I think season 4 is the first post-Bart Mania season. They were no longer under any pressure to give him extra attention in episode titles or specific plotlines. The network didn't pick up on this though. It's telling that by this season, it was getting ridiculous how often Fox would advertise an episode with clips of Bart, even if it was clearly about someone else. The staff were wary of overdoing things and were treating Springfield like a toy box of satire. A lot of the quirky characters they were creating or embellishing were grown-ups. It got easier to pair them up with Homer now, compared to season 3 where a lot of earlier established adults in the world were paired up with Bart. Ergo, Homer, with his big personality and wider range of story potential, permanently stayed the most utilized of the Simpsons. There's hardly any episodes that don't at least give him a B-plot in season 4. This is how the character distribution functions for basically the rest of the Simpsons run. And in a weird way, I think it reflects what exactly the original Sam Simon writers' room wanted, and right before they started to split. Not a show simply about a dumb dad, but an animated series that exceeded the boundaries of what was expected of primetime TV up to the early 90s. If you're not convinced of season 4 being against Bart, look at the episode titles. Bart doesn't appear in them once throughout the whole season. In fact, Marge's name is the most prolific. Again, if you've got a Marge was always the main character analysis, I'd love to hear it. There were Bart episodes, of course, but no appearances in the episode titles all year. Still, viewership improved a little between seasons 3 and 4. The nation loved The Simpsons for what it was now, an ensemble piece. Still no Maggie titles throughout the entirety of the first 4 years, which you could say is keeping up the gag of her being the misunderstood, underestimated Simpson. A true underdog. But in conclusion, is any of this important? If it was always an ensemble piece, then isn't the competitive streak of the 2 male leads overblown? That's exactly my point. With the benefit of hindsight, it's clear that The Simpsons had too much integrity to let 1 or 2 characters get in the way of what it was saying about the American way of life. It always does whatever it wants, and if that's to make what the audience wants, or to make something silly that they think only appeals to them, then so be it. I think all of The Simpsons are great characters and can picture any of them as the one holding the family together. But if we're gonna make the same mistakes sitcoms were doing that The Simpsons were satirizing and keep a picturesque image of those good old days, Homer might have been a source of gravity, but Bart was the star. Marge, Lisa, and Maggie have always been vital to the show's success too, though. No one's a loser for long in this family.
Well, Dad, I guess you won.
No, son, we both won.